You've been told to let go, but no one told you how. They said, just breathe, just relax, just stop thinking so much, as if peace was a button you could press. But if that worked, why do your thoughts still race at night? Why does your chest still feel heavy with things you can't fix, people you can't forget, and versions of yourself you can't seem to forgive? You close your eyes, but your mind stays open, gripping old memories, clinging to regrets, replaying scenes that ended long ago. You're not broken. You're just holding on to control, to stories, to a self you think must hold everything together. But tonight, something different happens, not because you force it, but because you finally understand. In Buddhist wisdom, there's no enemy greater than clinging, and no greater relief than seeing that what you cling to was never solid to begin with. Not your thoughts, not your identity, not even your pain. They're like clouds, and you are not the storm. As you listen tonight, those heavy thoughts will start to float. The tension in your body will soften, your breath will deepen, and little by little, the need to hold on will fade until there's only space, quiet, stillness. You won't just fall asleep, you'll fall free. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we begin, let this moment stretch out like a quiet pause in your heart. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to be anyone. There's no task left to finish tonight. No version of yourself you need to improve or perform. What's coming next isn't a lesson to memorize, but something your deeper self already knows. It's simply been buried beneath years of becoming. Let these words bring it back to the surface. Buddhist teachings speak of fetters, mental chains that keep us tied to suffering, not with locks or loud noise, but with subtle attachments that are easy to miss because they feel so normal. The most quiet ones, the ones we barely notice, are often the strongest. They're not made of metal, they're made of thought, they're made of self. There are 10 fetters, and they bind us to the cycle of suffering, of rebirth, of becoming. But there is one that is so hidden, so deeply woven into our minds, that it's rarely seen for what it is: identity clinging. The belief that I am this, that this is who I am, that this is how things must be. It starts early. Long before you had language for it, something inside was already shaping itself. A sense of me slowly forming around praise and punishment, around being seen and unseen. You were told you were good or bad, smart or slow, strong or weak. And those labels started to stick, not just as descriptions, but as truths, as boundaries, as chains. And from there, life became a series of moments trying to confirm that identity or fight against it, trying to become someone, trying to be better than who you were, or trying to hold tightly to who you thought you had to be. Even the so-called spiritual self can become another mask we wear, another layer of self-concept, another layer of becoming. The Buddha called this clinging to Sakkaya Ditthi, identity view, the belief in a permanent self, a core me that is unchanging. But if you look closely, really look, you'll see that everything you call me is always shifting. Thoughts arise and fall, moods change, bodies age, names change, beliefs evolve. So where is the you in all of that? This doesn't mean you're nothing. It means you are not one fixed thing. You're not the image in the mirror. You're not the story in your mind. You're not your habits, your history, or your plans. Your awareness watching it all. And even that, if held on to, becomes another subtle identity. The observer, the one who watches. Even that must be released. The trap is subtle. You think you've let go, but then a quiet pride grows. I'm someone who's learned to let go. Another layer, another becoming. Identity clinging hides in the background. It makes you overreact when someone criticizes you, not because of what they said, but because it shook the self you've built. It's why you feel threatened when your beliefs are questioned. It's why praise feels good, but never quite enough. Because at the core, the self that wants to be seen will never feel fully satisfied. It's made of emptiness, pretending to be solid. When you begin to let go of identity clinging, life softens. You no longer have to win every argument. You don't need to be the best at anything. You stop trying to be right all the time and instead become curious. You stop performing. You stop trying to belong by pretending. You just are. That freedom is lightness. It's rest. It's peace. But don't confuse this with passivity. Letting go of identity doesn't mean becoming dull or indifferent. It means being deeply alive without grasping, responding without reacting, acting without the burden of, I must be seen this way. You can still love, still create, still show up, but the tightness around being someone, that dissolves. And with it, suffering begins to fade. Identity clinging also fuels comparison, because when you believe you're a fixed self, you will constantly measure yourself against others. Their success feels like your failure. Their beauty makes you feel invisible. Their joy becomes your insecurity. But when the sense of self lightens, so does the need to compete. Suddenly, someone else's light doesn't dim yours. It adds to it. This clinging also feeds regret. The idea that I should have been different, it holds you in stories that can't be rewritten. But when identity softens, you begin to see that even the past wasn't as fixed as you thought. You were changing even then. You're not the same person who made that mistake. That person existed, and now they don't. Just like every moment, gone as soon as it arrives. You also start to see that the person you're trying to become doesn't exist either. The future self, wiser, calmer, more successful, is only an image, a mental movie. And just like the past, it's always changing. Clinging to becoming keeps you from fully resting in the present. And this moment, this breath, is the only place peace lives. Even suffering becomes more workable when you release identity. Pain still arises. But now it's not my pain or my problem. It's just pain. It's just sensation. It passes through you like wind through an open window. It doesn't define you. It doesn't mark you. It just is. Clinging to identity can also show up in subtle ways. In your roles. You think you are the helper, the strong one, the victim, the peacemaker. But those are just masks. Useful in some moments, harmful in others. When you cling to a role, you limit your response. You stop seeing clearly. You only act according to your script, not according to what this moment actually needs. To let go of identity is to let go of the need to be understood a certain way. It is to give up the constant project of self-maintenance. It's to stop asking the world to mirror back a version of you. Because you're no longer chasing a reflection, you're resting in what you've always been. Open, aware, and free. Letting go of identity also frees you from blame. When something bad happens, you don't need to find someone to blame, not even yourself, because it's no longer personal, it's just cause and effect. Conditions arising. There is space for compassion, for wise action, but not for tightness or shame. Many spiritual seekers fall into the trap of turning their journey into another identity. I am a meditator, I am a seeker, I am awakened. But each of these can become armor. Quiet ego, subtle clinging. Even your pain can become identity. I am the one who was hurt. And so you carry it longer than you need to. This doesn't mean denying what happened. It means not turning it into who you are. Because when you do, you give pain a permanent home. But pain wants to pass. And so does joy and everything else. Holding on turns passing clouds into permanent storms. Letting go also means allowing others to change. When we cling to our identity, we cling to others' identities too. We trap them in past versions of themselves. We judge them by one action. We keep their mistakes alive. But when you loosen identity, you give others room to grow. You see them freshly, moment by moment. And that's real love. Love without a story. This practice also softens fear. When you cling to a fixed self, death becomes terrifying, because it threatens the me you've built. But if there's no fixed self to lose, what is there to fear? Death becomes not an end, but a change in form, a return, a release. That's why letting go of identity is not cold, it's gentle. It's not about erasing yourself, it's about seeing clearly, about loosening the grip, about dropping the mask, not the heart. You become more connected, not less, more open, not numb, because now you're meeting life as it is, not through the filter of who you think you're supposed to be. So, how do we do this? Not through force, not by rejecting yourself, but by watching, by noticing, by sitting in stillness and observing how the sense of self arises and changes. Notice the voice in your mind that says, I am this, or I am not that. Watch how it shifts depending on the situation, the people, the mood. That fluidity is your clue. The self is not fixed, it's constructed. And what is constructed can be unconstructed. Meditation helps not because it makes you better, but because it shows you what's already true. Thoughts come and go. Feelings rise and fall, labels appear and dissolve. The more you watch, the more the illusion softens, not all at once, slowly, naturally. And the more you let go, the more space opens. Not empty space, but peaceful space. A space where you can breathe, where nothing has to happen, where you are enough, not because of who you are, but because you stopped needing to be anything. This is not about withdrawal, it's about wise engagement. You can still act in the world, still care, still create, but you do it with a light touch, without needing to prove, defend, or cling. You become like water, flowing, flexible, clear. Letting go of identity also frees your energy. So much of your effort goes into holding up the idea of you. What happens when that's not necessary? You relax, you come alive, you can laugh more easily, cry more freely, rest more deeply, because you are no longer at war with yourself. And that, right there, is the essence of this teaching. You are not a thing. You are a happening, a moment, a breath. There's nothing to defend, nothing to hold. And in that realization is the peace you've been chasing. Not because you became someone new, but because you finally stopped becoming. And so, when all clinging to self begins to loosen, when even the subtle idea of me no longer has the power to shape our thoughts, what remains? When identity dissolves like salt in water and nothing inside says, "This is who I am," there is a kind of silence. Not just the quiet of a calm room, but the stillness of the mind that no longer needs to become anything at all. But even here, something can remain, a final thread, the desire to transcend, the craving to awaken, a grasping not for status, not for ego, but for freedom itself. And that too must go. What we now touch is not ordinary release, it is the release without residue. Anupadisesa nibbana. This is the deepest letting go, beyond even the desire to let go. It's not emotional detachment. It's not the escape of someone numbed by life. It is total liberation from becoming, craving, clinging, and even from the subtle wish for attainment. Because as long as something is wished for, something is still held. Many people think of nirvana as a kind of bliss, a heavenly state where pain no longer touches you. But that idea is still built on wanting peace, wanting pleasure, wanting an outcome. But nirvana, in its final and most complete form, is the end of wanting anything at all. Not through suppression, but through understanding, a knowing so deep, so clear, that it sees through the entire structure of craving. Not only craving for material things, but craving for enlightenment, craving to be free, craving to arrive. This might seem confusing at first. How can the wish to be free be a trap? Isn't it natural to want liberation? Yes, it is. And in the beginning, that desire serves as a doorway. It pulls you into practice. It helps you endure discomfort. It keeps you on the path. But there comes a point where even this desire is a form of fuel, and as long as the fire is fed, it keeps burning. The craving to awaken can be noble, but it still binds you to the idea that there's something to reach, something to gain, some you that will one day arrive. And this is where the deeper work begins. Anupadisesa nibbana points to the cessation of even that. Not because it's wrong to seek awakening, but because true awakening includes the realization that there is nothing to attain, no one to attain it, and nowhere to arrive. Liberation is not something added to you. It's what remains when everything false falls away, including the one chasing it. This is not a mystical claim. It's a profound simplicity. In everyday life, you can already see hints of it. Think of the moments where you are fully present, not seeking, not resisting. No thought about before or after, no inner commentary. In those brief spaces, there's peace, not because something was achieved, but because nothing was added. That stillness is a glimpse, but in full awakening, it is unbroken. It is no longer an experience, it is the end of needing experience. the ending of all needing. And this is why the teachings warn us not to mistake the path for the end. The Buddha spoke of two kinds of nirvana, one with residue, when awakening occurs but the body and mind still function, and one without residue, after the final death of an arahant, when there is no rebirth, no remainder, no holding, no fuel left for becoming. This second is anupadisesa nibbana. The mind has let go of everything, even itself. This is not annihilation, it's not nihilism, it's not the destruction of a soul, because in Buddhism there was never a soul to begin with. There was only movement, conditioned arising, appearances mistaken for a person. What ceases is not a being, but the illusion of being. And so the fear many people have when they hear this, that they will disappear, is based on a misunderstanding. What disappears is delusion, what ceases is suffering, and the beauty of this teaching is that it doesn't demand belief. It asks for direct seeing. Start right where you are. Notice how even spiritual effort can become a weight, how the desire to progress turns into anxiety, how you might think, I should be further along. Why am I still stuck? All of these thoughts are built on becoming, the mind that always says, I'm not there yet. But what if you stopped? Not out of laziness, but out of deep trust. Trust that you don't need to build a better self. You need to see through the idea of self altogether. The work is not about polishing the mirror. It's about realizing the reflection isn't real. And the more you look, the more clearly that becomes. You start to see that every effort to fix yourself reinforces the belief that you are broken. But you were never broken, just misidentified. Even effort itself can become a clinging. This doesn't mean give up. It means shift how you practice. Stop chasing states. Stop comparing progress. Return to silence, to stillness, to awareness without commentary. Allow the mind to settle without grasping at peace. Let peace come, not as something gained, but as the natural result of no longer resisting. This is why many advanced practitioners say the path becomes more about subtraction than addition. In the beginning, we learn techniques, frameworks, and discipline. These are helpful. They bring clarity. But eventually, even those are released, like climbing a mountain and dropping your tools once you reach the summit. They served their purpose, but to keep carrying them would be unnecessary. The Buddha once said, the Dhamma is like a raft. You use it to cross the river. But once you've crossed, you don't strap the raft to your back and carry it through the forest. That would be foolish. In the same way, even the most sacred practices are eventually let go. Not with disrespect, but with understanding. They were never the goal, they were the means. What remains is silence. Not the absence of sound, the absence of disturbance. A mind that no longer shakes in the wind. A heart that doesn't contract around gain or loss. This is what the texts mean when they describe Nibbana as the unconditioned. Everything else is conditioned, dependent on causes. But the cessation of craving is not a result in the usual sense. It's what's revealed when all causes for suffering end. In everyday language, this can be hard to grasp, but in practice, you can taste it. When you stop chasing experience, even for a moment, there's a quiet clarity. When you stop needing to know, to be right, to defend your view, something softens. When you stop seeking meaning in identity or future rewards, you become present in a way that feels effortless. That presence is the beginning of release. And yet, the ego is clever. It can turn even non-seeking into a new identity, a new goal, a new project. Now, I will be the one who doesn't cling. And so we cling to non-clinging. Crave non-craving. Chase the end of chasing. It's subtle, but it's still becoming. The only way through is to let awareness deepen without ownership. Let insight arise without claiming it. Let peace come without making it yours. When something shifts inside, don't say, "I am more awake." Say nothing. Let the process unfold without grabbing it. The moment you name it, you've frozen it. You've made it into something separate. That's the moment to let go again. There's also a tendency to seek permanent safety. The mind wants something it can hold on to forever. It wants nibbana to be a kind of heaven, a place of eternal light and bliss. But that's just more conditioned thinking. The real freedom lies in the absence of needing permanence. When nothing needs to last, every moment is free. And perhaps the most radical part of this teaching is that even the concept of freedom is surrendered. Not that you become trapped again, but that the very need to define things as free or not free fades away. There's no more measuring, no more checking, no more tracking progress, just a natural ease. The path has ended not because it stopped, but because the walker disappeared. This is not something to be forced. The mind that's still entangled will try to rush. It will want instant awakening. But there is no instant here. Time itself becomes a story. Awakening is not about a future moment. It's about the falling away of the belief in time altogether. In this, the mind rests, deeply, fully. So when you hear that anupadisesa nibbana is the end of the path, know this. It's not the end in the way the mind imagines. It's not the end of being alive or feeling joy or participating in life. It's the end of clinging, the end of need, the end of the illusion that there was ever a separate self to suffer or attain. And it's here, in this understanding, that the greatest peace is found. Not as a reward, not as a prize, but as the natural state that was always beneath the noise, always waiting, always present, like the clear sky behind passing clouds. What disappears is not you. What disappears is the one who believed they were separate, the one who grasped, the one who feared. And what remains is not a thing, not a state, not a conclusion. What remains is what never began, what was never born, what cannot be described or defined, and in that, everything is already complete. Even peace, once grasped, becomes a burden. Even truth, once possessed, becomes distorted. In the stillness left by the falling away of craving, even the craving for freedom, something unexpected can arise. The impulse to hold on to the very path that pointed the way. The teachings, which served like a bridge over troubled water, start to feel sacred in themselves. And that, too, becomes a trap. There is a story the Buddha told about a man who uses a raft to cross a dangerous river. When he reaches the other side, he wonders whether to carry the raft on his back, out of gratitude. The Buddha's answer was clear: let it go. The raft served its purpose. Carrying it now only slows you down. This is what is meant by clinging to the Dhamma. the path, the practices, the teachings. Not the rejection of them, but the inability to release them when their job is done. When the mind holds even wisdom too tightly, it becomes just another form of attachment. Useful medicine turns to poison when it's consumed beyond the cure. One of the most direct teachings about this comes in the Alagadupama Sutta, the simile of the snake. The Buddha warned that just as someone who grabs a snake the wrong way will get bitten, someone who grasps the teachings without understanding will be harmed. The Dhamma is subtle. It points beyond words, beyond concepts. If we hold on to the words, thinking they are the truth themselves, we miss what they were pointing to. This is why the teachings are called a finger pointing to the moon. The finger is not the moon. To mistake the teachings for the thing itself is like worshipping the signpost instead of walking the path. Yet this happens often. The mind, once freed from worldly clinging, looks for safety in spiritual forms. It begins to identify with views, with rituals, with ideas. And even though these ideas may be profound, they are still ideas, not the living reality of awakening. There are many ways this clinging to Dhamma appears. One is through intellectual obsession. A person becomes fascinated by scriptures, lineages, debates. They quote suttas and argue over interpretations. But the heart remains untouched. The teachings become armor. The mind becomes sharp, but the insight remains shallow. In seeking to master the Dhamma, they forget to be mastered by it. Another form is rigid attachment to techniques, a certain meditation method, a specific sequence, a belief in one right way. These can all be helpful when applied with flexibility, but when held tightly, they turn into barriers. The practice becomes mechanical, joyless. Progress is measured by compliance instead of freedom. And the original spirit of inquiry, that open, curious mind, is replaced by fear of doing it wrong. Some practitioners even cling to the idea of not clinging. They become attached to detachment. They try to reject pleasure, connection, emotion, not from wisdom, but from fear. In doing so, they disconnect from life. They confuse coldness with equanimity. But true freedom isn't about numbness. It's about intimacy with all things, without fear of loss. Detachment that is held like a shield is still clinging, just with a different name. There is also a danger in identifying as a follower of the path. The label itself becomes part of the self. I am a meditator. I am a practitioner. I am a disciple of the Buddha. This can foster discipline and motivation, but it can also harden the ego. When we hold too tightly to our spiritual identity, we start to separate. We create distance between ourselves and those we perceive as not yet awake. Pride appears in disguise. Humility fades. Clinging to teachings can even arise in the relationship with the teacher. Reverence can become dependency. Gratitude can become idolization. And instead of using the teacher's guidance to turn inward, the student begins to orbit around the teacher's personality. The Dhamma is forgotten, replaced with loyalty to form. True teachers point you back to your own clarity. They remind you, do not cling to me. Do not build another self around devotion. This clinging can also hide in the desire for certainty. The teachings provide structure, answers, a way of understanding the world. But if we cling to them as unchanging truth, We resist the very nature of the path, which is based on impermanence, uncertainty, and direct experience. The Buddha himself warned against turning his words into dogma. He said to test the teachings like gold, not by blind faith, but by practice. And still, the mind loves to hold on to views, even views about non-self, emptiness, and impermanence. The teachings point to freedom, but they are not the freedom itself. They are strategies, tools, skillful means. The moment we believe the Dhamma is a fixed truth, we stop looking, we start defending, and we lose the spirit of the path, which is to know for yourself, directly, in silence, in stillness. To be clear, the Dhamma is not the problem. The problem is how the mind uses it. When the teachings are used with wisdom, they guide us. When they are grasped with ego, they bind us. The same fire that warms can burn if mishandled. That's why the Buddha emphasized right view, not rigid view. Right view is a starting point, not an end point. It is meant to be seen through like a window, not worshipped like a wall. Even the most beautiful teachings, compassion, mindfulness, liberation, can become ornaments if we're not careful, worn like badges, repeated like mantras, but never felt deeply, never lived. And this is the key. The Dhamma is not meant to be admired. It's meant to be embodied. The words are there to help you see. Once you see, the words fall away. This is why silence becomes so important in the later stages of the path. Not as absence, but as maturity. A silence that isn't empty. It's full of understanding. When insight deepens, the need to speak about it fades. The mind stops needing to name things. It trusts direct experience. It rests in knowing without clinging to knowledge. In this silence, even the Dhamma dissolves, not in disrespect, but in fulfillment. The teachings dissolve the way a map dissolves when the terrain is fully known. No more pointing, no more seeking, just the simplicity of presence. The body breathes, the heart opens, awareness remains, and there is no one left to hold it. And yet, life continues. Walking happens, speaking happens, eating, laughing, listening, all continue. But the clinging is gone. There is no one trying to be spiritual, no one trying to hold on to purity, just a flowing, just a naturalness that cannot be claimed. This freedom includes everything and excludes nothing. It doesn't reject teachings, but it no longer clings to them. It doesn't resist form, but it no longer depends on it. It bows to the path and then steps off of it, not to leave the path behind, but because the path has become the ground. And still, there may be a pull, the old pattern of grasping, the desire to hold on to the stillness, the insight, the clarity. But even this can be seen, and when it's seen, it doesn't need to be fought. It simply fades. Again and again, the hand relaxes, the heart opens, the weight drops. The Buddha's words are not chains, they are keys, but the keys only work when they're used, not when they're framed and admired. Use them, trust them, but do not carry them once the door is open. Walk through, and do so lightly. In the end, freedom is not something we define. It is what remains when definition ends. And even the Dhamma, sacred, powerful, wise, must be surrendered in that final silence. That is not betrayal. That is completion. There's a tenderness to this, a humility. We see the effort, the striving, the learning, all of it, and bow, grateful, not clinging. The teachings brought us home, and now we simply rest there. No identity to hold, no future to chase, no truth to defend, no path to walk. Just this, always just this. And so, when even the teachings have been laid down, when the words that pointed the way are no longer needed, what else remains to be released? Often it's the most virtuous things that are hardest to let go of. Not because they are wrong, but because they are praised, because they seem to shine, because they feel good to the mind that wants to be good. One of the most overlooked forms of clinging is not to wealth or power, but to goodness itself, to the quiet pride of spiritual progress, to the record of generous acts, to the subtle weight of accumulated merit. This kind of attachment wears a peaceful face. It looks like kindness, it sounds like humility, but underneath it something tight is still working. A calculation, a desire to store good karma, to bank enough purity to earn a future reward. This is the paradox. Striving to be good, to do good, to generate merit, can itself become a subtle grasping, a new identity, a quiet self built out of virtue. The Buddha taught about generosity, ethical conduct, and the cultivation of wholesome qualities. These are part of the path. But he also warned that attachment to any action, even a wholesome one, can sustain the sense of self. Doing good, when used skillfully, leads to peace. But when it becomes another way to build a story, I am someone who gives, I am someone who has earned, it reinforces the very thing the path is meant to dissolve. Merit, or punya, is often seen as a spiritual currency. Accumulate enough, and you earn good conditions in this life or the next. Acts of kindness, offerings, prayers, self-restraint, these are seen as steps towards something better. But if they are done with the motivation of getting, even if it's getting peace or enlightenment, they become bound by the same craving the teachings ask us to abandon. Merit-making becomes dangerous, not because it's unwholesome, but because it can be used to decorate the self. The mind may begin to compare. I've done more than others. Or it may worry, have I done enough? These are signs of attachment, not to the act, but to what the act is believed to achieve, to the imagined results, to the image of oneself as a virtuous person. Even subtle pride can bind the heart. The feeling of being more awake, more aware, more humble than others is still a form of elevation. It may not be loud, but it separates. It defines. It quietly whispers, "Look at me, becoming free." And in that moment, freedom is postponed. The most sincere practice begins to bend when it is done for accumulation, for record-keeping, when the motivation is rooted in outcome rather than clarity, when the focus shifts from presence to achievement. When one's goodness becomes a transaction with the universe, the spirit contracts. Life becomes a ledger, not a flow. In early stages of practice, the accumulation of merit has value. It softens the heart, inclines the mind toward kindness, and opens the door to deeper inquiry. But it is not the destination. The Buddha taught that even merit is impermanent, conditioned, dependent on causes. It is shaped by intention. And if the intention is bound by craving, even noble craving, the result is still entangled. This doesn't mean stop doing good, it means stop clinging to goodness. Let the action be enough in itself, not a step on a staircase. A kind word, a shared meal, a moment of silence. These don't need to become trophies. Let them pass. Let them ripple outward without needing to trace their return. This also applies to the idea of spiritual progress. Many people carry a hidden hunger for recognition, not from others, but from the cosmos, a desire to be seen by existence as worthy. This is still ego, still self, still the need to be acknowledged, even if only silently. And so even acts of deep practice can become colored by this longing. The moment we begin tracking progress, we've reintroduced the measurer, the observer who watches the path, who calculates gains and losses, who secretly asks, "How far am I now?" This watcher is the same mind that clings, the same self-view in disguise. And so the purest moments come when action flows without echo, when the path is walked without measurement. Letting go of merit means walking not to earn, but to be empty, sitting not to gain peace, but because sitting happens, speaking kindly not to improve karma, but because kindness is the natural response. It means trusting the heart's unfolding without reward, without scoreboard, without tally. This also means seeing through the stories we tell about past virtue. I've already given so much. I've done my part. These ideas keep us tied to a narrative. They keep us holding an identity based on effort, but effort cannot be clung to. The past cannot hold the present, and the story of goodness must be released like every other story. True merit has no memory. The action is complete when the intention ends. What remains is the effect in the world, not the echo in the self. There's no need to hold it, no need to count. The giving dissolves once given. The kindness ends at the touch. That is its beauty, that it lives fully in the moment, not in the mind. This perspective doesn't reject the value of wholesome actions. It reveals a deeper way to relate to them, without ownership, without future bargaining, without tying the act to an imagined identity. This is not about being passive. It is about being clean in the action, pure in the moment, free from the need to gain. The deeper this understanding grows, the more naturally goodness flows. Not because we should, but because we can't help it. A tree gives fruit, not because it wants reward, but because it is full. And when our hearts are full, merit arises as a natural movement, not from strategy, but from stillness. This also means letting go of guilt. Many people carry a sense that they are not good enough, that they have not done enough, that they must earn their right to be peaceful. But peace is not earned, it is revealed. It arises when the need to earn dissolves, when the burden of being worthy falls away, when the heart stops trying to be anything other than what it is. Merit-based thinking can sometimes delay this. It whispers, "When I have been good enough, then I can rest." But rest is not a reward. It is your natural state, uncovered. You don't need to qualify for stillness. You need only stop chasing the reasons that keep you from it. This understanding also transforms how we see others. When we cling to our merit, we often judge the path of others. We look for signs of their virtue. We weigh their actions. We compare. But when we let go, judgment drops. We see others not as more or less evolved, but as fellow travelers. Different paths, different timing, same emptiness behind the forms. This also invites a gentler view of life's challenges. When merit is seen as currency, suffering can feel like punishment. We ask, what did I do wrong? But when the idea of accumulation falls away, we stop assigning blame. Suffering is no longer seen as a debt. It is seen as life, arising, unfolding, dissolving, not personal, just part of the flow. Letting go of merit also invites freedom from effort, not laziness, but naturalness. Effort that is clean, light, responsive, not tight, not calculated, not burdened with expectation. We do what is needed, not for gain, but because it is clear, because it feels right, because the heart is open. The deepest peace arises when nothing is held. Not goodness, not accomplishment, not future reward. Even the wish to be remembered can soften. The fear of being forgotten dissolves when we are no longer trying to prove our worth. When we live fully in presence, there's no need to be written into history. There's only the moment, blooming and fading, like everything else. This letting go is not a rejection of beauty. It is the release of ownership. The sunrise is still beautiful, even if we don't paint it. A life can be deeply meaningful, even if it leaves no monument. Merit is like fragrance, real, but not something to carry. It passes through, it touches others, and it fades. And when it fades, something quieter remains, not emptiness in the hollow sense, but spaciousness. A field where action arises without force, where life moves without being pushed, where goodness flows without needing to be called good. This is what the Buddha pointed to when he spoke of the highest kind of giving. Giving without thought of self, other, or gift. The action is done, and that's the end. No echo, no attachment, no merit clung to, just the freedom of a heart that has nothing to protect. In the end, freedom means nothing left to count, no deeds to polish, no record to keep. Not because we stop caring, but because we care from a place that is too deep to be measured. A place where silence is the offering, where the clean breath is enough, where the open hand gives without memory. And it is here, in this clean space beyond effort, that the most natural joy arises, not born of merit, but of rest, not from being better, but from no longer needing to be, a joy that is quiet, stable, and without need for reward. That is the paradox. In letting go of the desire to be good, real goodness flows. In giving up the chase for merit, the heart becomes full. In forgetting the path, we walk it without resistance. And in the absence of striving, we meet what we were always trying to reach, a peace that holds nothing and lacks nothing. When merit is released and the weight of spiritual accounting dissolves, something deeper starts to stir beneath the surface. A quieter kind of heaviness. Not the weight of your own actions, but the stories you never chose. The ones passed down in silence. The ones you carry not because you made them, but because they were handed to you. Family patterns, ancestral echoes, emotional imprints that arrive long before understanding. These too must be seen. These too can be released. The Kulakama Vibhanga Sutta, a discourse spoken by the Buddha, presents a subtle but powerful truth. Not all suffering comes from this lifetime alone. Some of it is born from actions taken long ago. Not only our own actions, but the complex weave of karma that moves through families, cultures, and generations. Karma is not a punishment, nor a fate written in stone. It is movement. It is cause and effect, unfolding through time and mind. And like any pattern, it can be understood. When it's understood, it can be met with wisdom, and when it's met with wisdom, it can lose its grip. Many people live with a sense of emotional inheritance. They notice habits they didn't choose, reactions that feel automatic, fears that appear without clear reasons. There may be a family history of anxiety, conflict, silence, shame, or pride. These are not just memories. They are patterns repeated until they feel like truth, until they settle into the body like a second skin. Karma is not just what we do. It is also what we absorb, what we unconsciously continue, and what we must wake up to if we wish to be free. The Buddha did not deny the influence of past actions. He named it clearly. He explained that beings are born into different conditions, ease or hardship, health or illness, intelligence or confusion, because of actions committed in previous lives. But he also made something else very clear. No karma is final. Conditions shape us, but they do not trap us. We are not bound by our lineage, only affected by it. And those effects can be transformed. This is where mindfulness becomes more than presence. It becomes recognition. When we begin to observe our inner world with clarity, we start to see which parts of us are responses and which are repetitions. A reaction flares, and instead of being pulled into it, we ask, where did this begin? Is this mine, or is this inherited? Did I create this fear, or was I trained in it? Was this judgment born from experience, or handed down through belief? This inquiry isn't about blame. It's not about turning against our families or history. It's about softening the unconscious agreements we've been living under. Agreements to carry pain that isn't ours, agreements to repeat behavior that harms, agreements to define ourselves by the wounds of others. The moment we see them, we create space, and in that space, there is choice. Karma loses power when it becomes conscious. What is unseen controls us. What is seen can be released. Even biological inheritance, though real, is only part of the story. What we call family karma often includes emotional silence, unspoken grief, fear of love, resistance to vulnerability, control disguised as care. These forms pass down not as rules, but as atmosphere. They train us through tone, through absence, through repetition, and until we pause and look directly, they become the script we perform without knowing. But seeing is not enough. The next step is responsibility, not for what happened, but for what we do with it now. It means honoring the pain we received without making it into our identity. It means holding the complexity of love and hurt without needing to simplify. It means forgiving not to excuse, but to let go of the desire for repayment. Forgiveness in this context is not passive. It's a radical act of untangling. This release also includes grief. Many people carry unresolved sorrow from what was missing. Care not given, connection not offered, trust broken. The mind may try to dismiss it with logic. They did their best. It wasn't that bad. But the body remembers, and healing requires feeling what was not felt. Not to dwell, but to digest, to let it pass through so it no longer defines the nervous system. Releasing ancestral karma also means softening our view of the past. Seeing our parents not just as parents, but as people, shaped by their own fears, their own inheritance, their own unmet needs. This doesn't erase harm, but it replaces the fixed image with a fuller picture. And when we stop expecting those who harmed us to also heal us, we reclaim our power. Healing becomes our responsibility, and that is the path to freedom. Sometimes what needs releasing is not pain, but protection. Patterns that were once useful, vigilance, control, withdrawal, may no longer serve. They helped us survive in environments that felt unsafe. But survival strategies become prisons when we don't update them. What protected the child may trap the adult. Mindfulness allows us to see when safety is no longer in danger and to loosen the armor that became unnecessary. Inherited burdens also shape how we see ourselves. We may carry shame that didn't start with us, guilt that belonged to someone else, beliefs about unworthiness handed down through looks, through silence, through rules never spoken. These hidden messages settle deep, but they are not truths. They are learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. The process of releasing doesn't mean we forget our roots. It means we stop being bound by them. It means becoming the end of a pattern rather than its continuation. To do this, we must be willing to feel what our ancestors could not, to name what they could not name, to heal what they never had the space to touch. This is not spiritual performance. It is quiet, difficult work, but it is sacred. The power of this process lies in understanding karma as dynamic. The Buddha didn't teach that our fate is sealed. He taught that karma is shaped in every moment, by thought, by speech, by action. The past influences us, but it does not decide us. The present mind, clear and awake, has the ability to respond differently, to break the cycle, to plant new seeds. This shift also changes how we relate to the future. When we stop carrying old burdens, we no longer need to pass them forward. We raise children with more presence, less projection. We speak with honesty instead of habit. We love without the weight of what was withheld from us. We become the turning point in a long line of repetition. That is merit too, the kind that cannot be measured. And it is not just personal. The patterns that shape us also move through society. Collective karma, cultural conditioning, the pain of communities passed down through silence and struggle. When we heal individually, we weaken the collective web of harm. We become more honest, less reactive, less likely to cause pain from pain, more likely to speak from wisdom. This is not about perfection. We will still carry some echoes. Some imprints are deep. But even when the pattern still arises, our relationship to it changes. It no longer owns us. It is no longer unconscious. We can bow to it without becoming it. We can feel it and let it pass. One of the deepest aspects of karma is how it shapes our sense of possibility. When we grow up inside limitation, we often assume it is truth. That love must hurt. That joy must be rare. That safety is an illusion. But these are not facts. They are impressions, and we are not bound to them. The Buddha's teaching in this discourse reminds us that we can change our trajectory. not through denial of the past, but through full awareness of it, through wise intention, through new action. This is the empowerment the Dhamma offers, not to erase our history, but to free us from its chains. And it begins in the present, with breath, with noticing, with naming what we once avoided, with allowing what was too heavy to feel, with choosing not to repeat what was unkind, with becoming aware of the quiet choices that shape tomorrow. This is how karma changes, not through ceremony alone, but through clarity, through meeting life with the heart fully awake, through small, consistent shifts in how we respond, through the courage to stand still when the old pattern says, run, through the softness to stay open when the old pattern says, close. Each moment of awareness becomes a break in the chain. Each compassionate act, a new direction. Each truth spoken, a shift in the line. We don't have to do it all at once. We only have to begin. And as we do, we may find that what felt like burden slowly becomes blessing, that the weight we carried becomes the wisdom we offer, that what was passed down through pain can now be passed forward as peace. There is no need to fix the past, only to meet the present fully, to honor the pain without being defined by it, to thank the lessons without staying in their shadows, to hold the story with tenderness and then to set it down. And when we do, something quiet opens, a sense of spaciousness, not empty but clean, a place where the future is no longer shaped by fear, a place where the past is no longer running the show, a place where presence becomes home. This is the gift of release, not forgetting, not pretending, but the deep knowing that we are no longer bound, that we have seen and felt and softened, that we have broken the cycle with clarity, that we carry love, not pain, that we remember with peace, not burden, and that from this place the path continues, lighter, clearer, and truly free. After releasing the weight of generational pain and stepping out of inherited stories, what begins to reveal itself is not only clarity, but spaciousness. In that space, something subtle remains, something that still feels like you. It isn't the past, it isn't family, it's not even your name or history. It's quieter than identity and gentler than thought. It is the sense that there is a stable center within that observes everything else. The one who sees, the one who watches, the silent witness. For a time, it feels like freedom, but even this must be seen clearly. In many teachings and practices, becoming the observer is encouraged. It creates a gap between reaction and awareness. It softens identification with thoughts and emotions. It offers a sense of distance from the chaos of experience. And for those entangled in pain, this is a gift. To realize, I am not my anger, or I am not my sadness, is a liberating insight. It's the beginning of stepping out of suffering. But that's all it is, the beginning. At some point, even this I who watches becomes a construction. Subtle, yes. Peaceful, yes. But still a self. Still something owned. Still something held onto. The observer begins to feel like the final truth, but it is still within the field of experience. It still arises. It still depends on conditions. It is not as solid as it seems. The mind is clever in preserving itself. After letting go of roles, beliefs, stories, and even the idea of self, it will take refuge in what feels formless. It will say, I am not the body, I am the awareness of the body. I am not the thought, I am the space in which thought appears. These perspectives bring calm. They create separation from stress, but they also reintroduce a quiet sense of being someone who sees. The observer is a cleaner version of ego, refined, silent, but still present. This identity of the witness can remain unnoticed for years. It doesn't scream, it doesn't fight, but it holds its shape through spiritual language, through quiet pride, through the effort to remain present. It speaks softly. I am the one who does not get lost. I am the one who notices without judgment. These thoughts are subtle self-definitions. They divide experience into observer and observed. And where there is division, there is still clinging. True non-duality requires that even this line dissolves, not just the surface, but the subtle structure underneath. The idea that there is a center within awareness must be questioned, not denied, not rejected, but looked at with deep honesty. Where is this witness located? What shape does it have? When does it arise? If it can be found, if it can be described, then it too is part of the arising, not outside of it. The practice then becomes even more quiet. It is not about resting in the observer. It is about noticing that the observer also comes and goes. There are moments of intense clarity, and there are moments of total forgetting. If the observer were truly permanent, it would never leave. But it does. It fades when attention is pulled. It returns when the mind is steady. It changes depending on awareness. This means it is not ultimate. What happens when the observer is released? Experience remains. Sound, sight, sensation, thought, all still happen, but there is no longer a someone watching. Awareness is not missing, but there is no longer a sense of ownership within it. It is not being done by anyone. It is not being directed or claimed. It simply is. This dissolving is not annihilation. It is intimacy. Without the watcher, the division disappears. There is no space between awareness and what is seen. There is no distance between self and world. Experience unfolds with no reference point. The boundary falls, and what's left is full inclusion. There is often fear around letting go of the observer. It feels like the last refuge, the final safe place. To let it dissolve can feel like disappearing, but what disappears is only the illusion of control. What vanishes is the idea of a stable core within the flow. What remains is undivided knowing, not owned, not directed, not split. The reason this shift matters is because even the observer can suffer. The one who watches still desires clarity, still resists confusion, still subtly prefers peace. And those preferences shape experience. They filter what is seen. They select what is allowed. This selection, however gentle, is still tension. It creates effort. It maintains control. In deep release, there is no preference. Joy and grief appear with equal space. Movement and stillness are not in conflict. Confusion is not a problem. Clarity is not a goal. Everything that arises is seen without distance, not because a witness is choosing to allow it, but because the mechanism of choice itself is absent. And in that absence, something radical opens, not another state, not another realization, but the end of fragmentation, life as it is, whole and complete. No commentary, no center, no border, just this, undivided, unfiltered, unowned. This does not mean passivity. Actions still happen. Words are spoken, decisions are made, but they arise from clarity, not from a manager within. The idea that I must observe myself to stay aligned is replaced with a naturalness that needs no monitor. It is a return to the original simplicity, where awareness is not directed, but effortless, where presence is not maintained, but constant. This also changes how effort is understood. In earlier practice, effort is required to remain mindful. Attention must be redirected. The mind must be brought back. But once the observer dissolves, there is no struggle to be present. Awareness is no longer something to maintain. It is simply the ground, the background, the space in which life unfolds, unclaimed. Even spiritual practice begins to soften. There is less need to watch thoughts, to analyze reactions, to track progress. Practice becomes more about resting in openness than fixing anything. Less doing, more being. Less seeking, more trust. Trust that without a watcher, nothing is lost. Trust that awareness doesn't need to be managed. This shift also transforms compassion. As long as there is an observer, compassion can remain conceptual. I see your pain. I choose to be kind. But when the observer dissolves, separation dissolves. Compassion is no longer a choice. It is the natural expression of no distance, of direct connection, of love without an observer. This intimacy with experience also includes the body. With no one watching, sensation becomes more vivid. There is no filter, no one deciding what to feel. The body becomes an open field, alive, responsive, grounded. Movement arises not from decision, but from need. Rest, gesture, stillness, all unfold in harmony with the moment. Thoughts also change texture. Without an observer naming them, they lose sharpness. They pass through like clouds, not narratives. They arise and vanish without echo. There is no one holding them, no one pushing them away, no one turning them into identity. Thinking becomes softer, quieter, not always, but often. And even when it's busy, it's not personal. Language becomes simpler. The need to explain, to describe, to be understood relaxes. There is less interest in convincing, in performing, in appearing wise. Words become tools, not extensions of self. Communication becomes clearer. There is no one inside trying to be heard. Just speech, offered freely. Relationships deepen too. Without a watcher managing interaction, there is more presence. Listening becomes whole. Eye contact becomes connection, not monitoring. Silence is no longer awkward. Boundaries arise naturally, not from calculation, but from direct knowing, from trust in what the moment calls for. This dissolving also touches memory. Without an observer cataloging experience, the need to remember everything fades. The past becomes lighter, less sticky, less personal. There is no one building a story. no one collecting moments. Memory arises when needed, but it no longer defines. Future also softens. Planning happens when necessary, but it's not driven by control. There is less obsession with outcome, less anxiety about what will be. The observer who used to prepare, predict, and rehearse is no longer active, and so the mind relaxes. The heart opens. Life is lived in real time. Even suffering, when it arises, is met differently. Without an observer labeling it, pain is no longer a problem. It is sensation. It is emotion. It is energy. It moves. It shifts. It's not resisted. It's not owned. There is no one caught in it, and so it passes more easily. It is felt fully, but not stored. This does not mean the mind never speaks. Thoughts still appear, concepts still form, but they are seen for what they are. Movements within the field, not messages from a self, not signals from a watcher. Just appearance, just sound, just movement, not to be grasped. And when the observer is truly gone, what's left is not emptiness in a negative sense. It is fullness without edges, presence without shape, knowing without knower. It cannot be described without reducing it, but it can be lived, not as an experience, but as the natural unfolding of what always was. There is no final moment of dissolving. It happens in layers. The idea of self peels back, then returns, then softens again. The observer lets go, then reforms. This is not failure. It is the rhythm of unfolding. What matters is not holding on when it returns, not identifying, just seeing, just resting, just letting the tide come and go. This path is not about removing yourself. It is about seeing there was no self to begin with. Not to destroy, but to discover. Not to reject, but to relax. Into what already is. Awareness without boundary. Life without a center. Peace without a watcher. And in that simplicity, everything begins to feel whole, not because it changed, but because the one who stood apart has disappeared. There is no more separation, no more witness, just presence, just freedom, just this. When the mind no longer seeks a center, when even the observer dissolves into silence, and when the pull to continue dissolves into a steady relinquishment of becoming, there can arise a rare clarity. Yet from that stillness, something gentle may whisper again. A faint hope, a subtle curiosity, the soft pull of continuation in a different form. It is not loud or desperate. It doesn't demand. It simply lingers. The wish for one more chance, a better life, a finer rebirth. Even in letting go, the mind can still long for existence. This is where samsara shows its most delicate face, not through suffering, but through seduction. The cycle of becoming does not always wear the form of pain. Often it appears as beauty, opportunities to return, to relive, to refine what was unfinished, to perfect what was broken, to continue loving what feels precious, to reach some future version of awakening or truth or joy. The mind tells a quiet story, that the next moment, the next body, the next lifetime will be clearer, wiser, more whole. That the path continues, that there's still something more to experience, to know, to become. This, too, is attachment. Rebirth is often misunderstood as a reward for virtue, a continuation of progress, or a stage for spiritual completion. But in the Buddha's teachings, rebirth is neither punishment nor reward. It is merely the result of conditions. It is fueled by what remains unfinished, the craving that continues to move the mind forward, seeking stability in impermanent forms. Even a birth into blissful realms is not final. No realm, no matter how radiant, is beyond change. All of them pass. What arises will cease. Even joy cannot last forever if it depends on causes. This is why the Buddha did not point toward heaven as the goal. He pointed toward release. He did not encourage becoming again and again, but rather the end of becoming. This is not rejection, it is wisdom. It is the deep knowing that the cycle, however beautiful its forms, is unstable, and what is unstable cannot be relied upon. There are many types of rebirth described in the teachings: realms of suffering, realms of desire, realms of form, and formless realms of vast peace. But all of them, without exception, are conditioned. The body may be different, the mind more subtle, the lifespan longer, the joy more refined, but the nature of samsara remains. It continues because the desire for existence continues. The attachment may evolve, becoming more subtle, more spiritual, but it remains the same fuel. This subtle attachment is not always easy to recognize. In early practice, the mind sees the obvious: the craving for pleasure, the fear of loss, the need to be seen. But deeper in, the attachment to becoming appears in spiritual language. It speaks of Dharma missions, bodhisattva vows, cosmic purpose. It wraps itself in compassion, in service, in progress. And yet, it quietly insists on future, on identity, on survival through roles. To see this clearly requires deep honesty. It requires a willingness to sit with the discomfort of not continuing, the discomfort of not becoming, the discomfort of cessation. The desire to return must be observed without feeding it, not pushed away, not indulged, but known as it is, a form of clinging. The mind must grow steady enough to stand in front of this longing and not move. This work also means seeing that suffering doesn't end just because one is reborn in a favorable state. The tendencies of the mind follow, the old patterns resurface, fear still visits, desire still arises. Even in celestial realms, beings fall. They are not immune to loss. Their pleasure is temporary, their lives are long, but not eternal. And when those lifespans end, beings fall to other realms based on the residual tendencies still unpurified. This is not a story meant to frighten. It is a lesson in impermanence. To become again is to begin again. To begin again is to re-enter the cycle. There is no safe place within samsara, no final refuge within the conditioned world. No experience, no realm, no attainment can serve as permanent rest if it depends on arising conditions. The craving for rebirth also hides in the wish to leave a legacy, to be remembered, to continue through influence, teachings, creations, or lineages. But even this desire must be seen clearly. Legacy is a kind of echo, a lingering form of self, a soft craving to leave a mark. But all marks fade, all echoes disappear, all stories eventually dissolve. Releasing this longing is not despair, It is freedom from needing continuity to feel complete. Letting go of rebirth also brings up fear. Fear of disappearing, of being nothing, of losing awareness. But the Buddha never taught that release meant annihilation. He taught that what ceases is clinging, what ends is suffering. The fear of not existing is based on the belief in a self that exists. When that belief fades, the fear fades with it. Awareness is not destroyed. The compulsion to become is what falls away. There is also a common view that awakening leads to rebirth in pure lands or luminous realms of enlightened beings. These ideas are often misunderstood as final destinations. But in the original teachings, full awakening ends the cycle altogether. No more arising, no more becoming, no more rebirth. Not because something is taken away, but because nothing remains that would continue. The mind no longer fuels the process. There is no thirst left to sustain it. The practice of renunciation, then, is not about turning away from joy or from life. It is about no longer needing it to feel whole. It is about seeing clearly that peace cannot come from what changes. That true security is found only in what does not depend on time, form, or continuity. That kind of peace is not built, it is uncovered. When the craving to become is gone, what remains is stable, untouched, free. This path also asks for subtle patience. The craving for rebirth may not vanish in a single moment. It may return in different forms. It may appear as service, as hope, as longing for another chance. But each time it arises, it can be seen more clearly, not judged, not indulged, just gently released. Again and again, the hand that reaches can open. The teachings also offer a powerful reflection. Birth leads to death. Wherever there is becoming, there will be aging, loss, and ending. This is not negativity. It is the deepest honesty. And when this is accepted fully, the mind begins to quiet. The need for stories fades. The desire for movement slows. The value of each moment increases, not because it must return, but because it need not. The Buddha's path invites a shift from narrative to presence, from future to now, from becoming to being, and then from being to the dissolving of even that, not through force, but through deep seeing, through no longer needing to be anything at all. This view also dissolves the trap of spiritual progression as identity. Many practitioners secretly imagine future lifetimes of increasing wisdom, higher forms, more refined minds. But this is just spiritualized becoming. The path is not about accumulating subtle selves. It is about releasing the compulsion to construct them at all. Even the desire to meet loved ones again, to return and finish karmic work, can be seen as gentle forms of clinging. Love does not need rebirth to be real. Completion does not require continuation. What is unfinished in one life does not need to be solved in another. Peace does not wait at the end of repetition. It waits in the end of craving. To see this is to realize the courage required for complete renunciation, not rejection of life, but the full willingness to not return, to let all formations pass, to let all names fade, to release the cycle, not because it is wrong, but because it cannot provide what does not end. This understanding softens ambition. It loosens the need to grow endlessly. It stops the pursuit of better versions. It ends the quiet hunger for one more try. And in that ending, a different kind of fullness arises, a stillness that needs nothing, a joy that isn't based on gain, a completeness that comes from not continuing. That is the heart of liberation, not existence refined, not rebirth perfected, but craving ended. No more seeds planted, no more roots clinging, no more becoming. And from that ground, action becomes effortless. Service becomes spontaneous. Compassion flows without identity. Life moves through form, but nothing claims it. There is no I that needs to return. Just presence doing what it does and passing like a breeze through a field. The ending of rebirth is not the end of aliveness. It is the end of ownership, the end of fuel, the end of cycles made by thirst. And in its place, stillness. In its place, peace. This is what the Buddha pointed to again and again, the path not of more life, but of no more clinging to life, the path not of endless rising, but of final rest. To walk this path is to let even the beautiful go, to stop hoping for better, to stop fearing endings, to rest finally in the deepest release. No more birth, no more becoming, no more return, just peace, simple, unshaken, free. When the fires cool and the mind stops grasping, a new depth of stillness begins to open. No longer reacting with craving or aversion, the heart begins to settle into subtler layers of perception. Experience becomes clearer, more vivid, more spacious. But within that clarity lies another hidden pull, one that does not burn hot like desire or sting sharp like anger. It comes softly, almost sweetly, the lure of beauty, the pleasure of stillness, the rapture of sensation that does not harm but still holds. This is not craving in its ordinary form. It is the kind that enters quietly, wearing robes of light and peace. And because it feels good, it often goes unnoticed. The danger of beauty is not that it exists, but that it can become another resting place for attachment. Not all clinging is violent or obvious. Some of it arises through appreciation. When beauty is not understood, it seduces the heart into wanting. Not wanting in the usual sense of possession, but in the form of prolonged attention, the desire for continuation, the wish for what is pleasant to remain, the subtle sense that the moment is not enough unless it stays. This kind of attachment can happen anywhere, toward people, places, music, even silence. But it becomes particularly potent in meditation. As concentration deepens, the body settles, and the mind becomes unified. States of joy and rapture can arise. These states are often marked by warmth, brightness, or an intense feeling of pleasure flowing through the body. They are known as piti and sukha in the Buddhist tradition. And while they are wholesome and skillful to develop, they are not liberation. They are still formations, still impermanent, still not to be clung to. If a meditator is not careful, these states become the new goal. The practice becomes focused not on understanding, but on reproducing those feelings. Sessions are measured by whether the rapture returns. A silent craving forms around peace, around clarity, around inner beauty. This craving may feel harmless, even spiritual, but it binds the mind in the same way as grosser forms of desire. Beauty also captures through the senses in daily life. A face, a song, a natural scene. Even ideas can carry beauty, the beauty of elegant thought or of teachings that stir the heart. These encounters are not problematic until the mind begins to reach, until it assigns specialness, until it fears their loss. This reaching is what turns a passing moment into a fixed need, and that fixation, even when refined, is still bondage. The Buddha taught that whatever is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self must be seen as such, not just intellectually, but directly. When beauty arises and is met with understanding, it becomes a portal to insight. We see its arising, its peak, its fading. We watch the mind react. We notice the subtle leaning in, and in that awareness, the leaning can soften. But when beauty is met without clarity, the mind grasps. Even if the grasp is soft, it is still pressure, still formation, still becoming. This grasp doesn't only want more, it also fears loss. And fear is a sign that attachment has already taken root. In some cases, beauty becomes a kind of refuge. The meditator seeks the jhanic states not for insight, but for escape. The world feels heavy, and rapture becomes the place to hide. But clinging to pleasure, even refined pleasure, builds dependency. The mind begins to turn away from the ordinary. It becomes selective, only at ease in certain conditions. The natural flow of life, the full range of joy, pain, confusion, and clarity, feels intrusive. Practice becomes narrow. Letting go of sensory rapture does not mean rejecting it. It means meeting it fully, without making it into something personal, without building stories around it, without shaping identity from it. The state may arise. Let it. Enjoy its presence without owning it. When it fades, let it go without longing. This is how beauty is honored without becoming trapped by it. The danger also arises when beauty strengthens conceit. A practitioner may become identified with their ability to access deep states, with their capacity for calm or radiant experience. This identification reinforces the sense of self in subtle ways. It quietly says, "I am someone who has attained," and with that comes comparison, pride, subtle superiority, a craving not only for beauty, but for the image of being close to it. Clinging to beauty can also delay wisdom. Because rapture feels complete, the mind may lose interest in deeper inquiry. It rests in pleasant states without asking questions, without examining impermanence, without noticing suffering. Insight practice requires movement beyond comfort. It demands the courage to sit with what is unstable, unsatisfying, and impersonal. Beauty, when grasped, can become a wall to that truth. Even in the arts, beauty seduces. A well-crafted poem, a haunting melody, a piece of wisdom perfectly phrased. These can all become objects of attachment. They stir something deep, and that stirring is mistaken for truth. But if truth depends on form, it is not stable. The path does not reject art or sound or expression, but it asks us to see their nature, to enjoy without need, to let go without regret. There is also beauty in concepts, the elegance of a philosophy, the symmetry of a teaching. These intellectual forms can become attachments when they provide comfort rather than clarity. A belief, when beautiful, can be harder to question, but the Dharma is not based on how it sounds, it is based on what is real. Even the most inspiring idea must be tested against experience. If it cannot hold up to the truth of impermanence and non-self, it must be released. As dispassion grows, beauty is not denied, it is deepened. It is no longer a means to an end. It is simply what arises. The scent of a flower, the stillness of dusk, the rhythm of walking. These are no longer doorways to desire. They are expressions of the moment, complete as they are. No reaching, no clinging, just clear seeing. This clarity reveals that beauty is not in the object, but in the mind that meets it with awareness. When craving fades, everything becomes more beautiful, not because it changes, but because the mind is no longer seeking. The heart is open, and beauty flows through it, leaving no residue. There is no stickiness, no need to hold, just appreciation, followed by release. Even spiritual language can be seductive. Words like grace, bliss, or awakening may carry emotional charge. They create expectations. The practitioner may begin to seek experiences that match these words, but no word can capture the simplicity of truth. If we cling to how awakening is described, we may miss its presence. It is not always radiant. Often it is quiet. Often it feels like nothing special. The beauty we imagine is not always the peace we find. The practice, then, is to see the moment clearly, not for its decoration, but for its nature, not for its charm, but for its truth. The pleasant and the unpleasant are both part of this field, the beautiful and the painful, the still and the restless. When none are preferred, all can be known. Letting go of sensory rapture also requires attention to intention. Why are we seeking beauty? What are we avoiding? What do we believe it will provide? These questions bring us closer to the core, closer to the heart of the grasp. Often, beauty is pursued to cover a sense of lack, to distract from the fear of groundlessness, to create an illusion of stability. When these tendencies are seen, they can be met with gentleness, not judged, not suppressed, just known. As the mind grows quieter, its sensitivity increases. Beauty becomes more frequent, not because the world changes, but because perception refines. This is why letting go becomes more urgent. As awareness sharpens, so does the pull of beauty. But wisdom sees through it. Wisdom enjoys the moment, but never gets lost in it. The joy is real, but it is no longer needed. This is the difference between pleasure and attachment. Pleasure is natural. It arises and passes. Attachment resists the passing. It turns a moment into a possession, and in that possession, suffering is born. The fire returns. The burn begins again. Even if the object is subtle, even if the moment is peaceful, if there is clinging, there is tension. The path is not to remove all beauty. It is to meet it with wisdom, to stay steady when joy arises, to remain clear when peace unfolds, to appreciate what is present without building a home inside it. When that becomes possible, freedom deepens. The heart is no longer ruled by preference. The senses are no longer pushed or pulled. The world still offers its forms, but the mind no longer builds illusions around them. This freedom is not cold, It is alive, tender, present. It includes all, and it holds nothing. This is the heart of dispassion, not detachment from life, but openness to life without need, not indifference, but intimacy without grasping. Beauty, when seen clearly, becomes a teacher. It shows us how the mind moves, how it seeks, softens, or tightens. It reveals our relationship to joy, to form, to impermanence. And when the lesson is learned, the experience can be complete. No guilt, no holding, no regret. In this way, even the most subtle joys are woven into the path, not obstacles, but invitations, not destinations, but insights. The path remains grounded, direct, and free from illusion. There is room for everything, but nothing is made into a foundation. This is how the practice matures. The heart opens wider, the mind lets go more easily. The senses remain, but they do not rule. The beauty of the world continues, but its charm no longer binds. Joy is present, peace is present, and the practitioner walks forward, clear, open, unshaken. As the mind becomes free from the grip of beauty and learns to meet even the most alluring experiences without attachment, a deeper quiet starts to reveal itself. Not a silence of absence, but of stillness that is undisturbed by form. No longer pulled by sensation, the practitioner no longer moves with every wave of experience. And from this stillness, the heart begins to understand something even more profound, that views, like pleasures, can be clung to. Ideas, positions, answers, even spiritual concepts can become attachments just as powerful as any desire. And when one sees this, silence takes on a new meaning. In the Buddha's life, there were many moments when silence was his clearest teaching. He did not always answer, even when asked the deepest questions about the nature of the self, the universe, life after death. There were times when he simply remained quiet. This was not out of confusion or evasion. It was a deliberate act of wisdom, a refusal to be pulled into speculation, into fixed positions, into the endless turning of concepts that do not lead to freedom. This kind of silence was known as noble silence. It was not avoidance, but clarity. The Buddha did not silence himself to protect a belief or to guard a mystery. He stayed silent because he saw that the questions themselves came from a place of grasping, a need to know, to define, to hold reality in a fixed way, and any answer would only feed that grasping. The silence was the answer. These metaphysical questions, often referred to as the unanswerables, were not denied. They were simply set aside as not useful. Whether the world is eternal or not, whether the self exists after death, whether the universe is finite or infinite, these were questions that the Buddha saw as irrelevant to the direct ending of suffering. To chase answers to these was to remain tangled in views, never arriving at peace. This silence points to a radical kind of freedom. Most people build their identities around what they believe, around answers, around knowledge, around the sense that they are right. To not hold a view, to not need to explain, to rest without position, this is a freedom that goes unnoticed by the world. But it is the very heart of liberation. The absence of the need to speak becomes a sign of the absence of clinging. This does not mean the Buddha never taught. He spoke when his words would help, when they would point directly to the ending of suffering. when they would open understanding rather than strengthen ego. But when a question came from the desire to grasp the ungraspable, he did not participate. He stayed quiet. And in that quiet, he revealed the futility of speculation. In today's world, silence is often misunderstood. It is seen as weakness, ignorance, or lack of commitment. But in the context of practice, silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes a mirror. It shows us what we are trying to hold, what we are unwilling to let go of. When we are met with silence, we must turn inward. We must examine the root of the question, the root of the need to know. Clinging to views is one of the most refined attachments. It is often overlooked because it feels noble, intellectual, or even spiritual. But every view, no matter how subtle, becomes a boundary. It divides the world into what is true and false, right and wrong, enlightened and confused. And with that division comes conflict, both inner and outer. The mind becomes rigid, the heart narrows, clinging returns. The Buddha warned against this again and again. He did not ask his followers to accept his words blindly. He encouraged testing, reflection, direct experience. But he also taught that freedom comes not from gaining views, but from letting them go. Even right view, when held too tightly, becomes a trap. It is a raft to be used and then set down. This teaching invites a different relationship with knowledge, one that values clarity over certainty, one that allows space for